Hi everyone, Rory at Clawden Painting Studio here with a special video, getting some early access to some miniatures from Flags of War for two of their upcoming Kickstarters. Later this month there'll be a Kickstarter for figures for the War of Austrian Succession, and in April or May there will be a new skirmish game and miniatures called Border Wars, which is to do with the Border Reivers in the 16th century. Let's have a look at the War of Austrian Succession miniatures first of all. This war was between 1740 and 1748 in the European theatre, a North American theatre and also an Indian theatre. So these British figures will also fit in with Flags of War's 1745 Jacobite rebellion range, which up till now was lacking British government infantry marching. They were all in action poses, so nice to see that we have that option now for the 45 as well. So we've got line infantry in a tricorn, nicely sculpted. I think it's Nick Collier has done this range. We need to trim some of the metal away between the scabbard and the leg. Mould lines fairly minimal, can't really see much there. A little what I call a worm, a little bit of extra leftover metal from the casting process, one of the vents. Grenadier, it's got really nice detail in the mitre, should make it easy to pick out when painting. And an ensign waiting for a flag there. And wouldn't you know it, Flags of War provide flags for this period. So, how did this war come about? Charles VI of the Habsburgs, or Austria, he dies. His daughter Maria Theresa wants to claim the throne. She's backed by, amongst others, Britain and the Dutch. But there was an earlier declaration that said if there were no male heirs, then the eldest daughter in the line would succeed. And I believe Joseph I, who was Charles's brother, I think, was the emperor, and then it passed to Charles. Neither of them had male sons, but that earlier declaration meant that the daughters of Joseph had a claim to the throne. They were married off to Hanover and Saxony, who were backed by the French and the Prussians. And you can't really go through the decades in the 18th century without a succession argument and a war across the continent, so that was another one. Here are the Dutch, allied with the British in this war. A drummer, an ensign, and line infantry as well. Quite a similar uniform to the British. There are some differences on the cuffs that I can see there. A bit of a mould line down the cartridge box, but decent castings with good level of detail, I would say. So, as I say, in the battles in Europe, North America and India. In North America, it's known as King George's War, and it was the 1740s as opposed to the French and Indian War, which was 1750s, but basically followed the same style of raids between the French and their native allies and the British. The British uniforms are slightly different to the French-Indian War period. The lacing on the cuffs and the French uniforms of the period have a different collar in the French-Indian War as they do to the 1740s, as far as I'm aware. You can get French in the Jacobite rebellion range. Worth pointing that out. So, if you want to fight in the North Americas, rather than it being French-Indian War, just call it King George's War if you're worried about people getting angry about your cuff lacing. On to the Border Wars figures. I have a mounted Reaver here, looking quite fine in his wearing his jack over his torso there, his armour, steel and cloth jacket, and his steel bonnet, his burgonet, which was quite typical of that period in the sort of 1550s Elizabethan conquistador period. It's a fine 3D sculpt. I'm not sure who the sculptor is, but it's not Nick Collier who did the Jacobite range, sort of traditional green stuff, as far as I'm aware. The other models I've been sent are some Reivers on foot, so I'll bring them in. So this fella with a separate musket and an archer. It's really nice castings. Great big pantaloons. Not much in the way of mould lines at all to tidy up there, so that's really nice. Despite the fact that I'm now based in the Highlands and I'm interested in the Jacobite rebellion, hence Culloden Painting Studio, I actually grew up in the Borders. So it's nice to see a range for and a game coming out specifically for this period of cross-border raiding where I grew up. Lots of livestock farming, and under the cover of darkness people would go and sheep and cattle rustle. There were strange laws known as the march laws or border laws that let you form a counter raiding force within 6 days of your property being stolen, and you could pick people up along the way and get your stuff back. So there was lots of fighting going on, lots of family rivalries, and sort of, although there were march wardens who were appointed to keep the peace, they weren't very good at it and were often very biased towards their own family loyalties. Borders is a lovely place to visit. You can still see peel towers, which are the sort of fortified manors that people lived in during the period. And this game, I'm really looking forward to it. Perfect opportunity for doing small games with a handful of figures, and some opportunities for neat modelling. Making a peel tower could be a good project. I hope to do another video or 3 soon enough with some painting guides for these miniatures, the Reivers, as well as the Austrian Succession Dutch and British, who will also fit into that Jacobite rebellion period. So please look out for them in future. Big thanks to Iain for sending these up from Glasgow for me to look at, and I hope showing them off here will convince plenty of people to go and back the Kickstarters when they come live, hopefully later this month for Austrian Succession and April-May for the Border Wars. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye for now.